I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Women Talking editors Roslyn, Kalloo, and Chris Donaldson. The film is about women deciding their future after they discover they've been assaulted by the men in their Mennonite community. So it's a intense subject matter. What did you think of the story and the script when you first read it? Let's start with Roslyn.
Well, I had read the novel, and so I knew the story behind the script, and I just was really impressed by the complexity of the conversation, and it was so dramatically intriguing how the women just come together and decide what to do about the situation. And it was kind of interesting that it dealt with the aftermath of violence and not the violence itself. And I think it really resonated, especially now in these times when more and more of these stories where women are getting an opportunity to tell more and more of these stories. So I found it very like boldly feminist and incredibly moving. And I knew it was going to be, in Sarah's hands, a really great special film.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. And also, because the book was almost set entirely in the loft, it was amazing to read how Sarah had sort of expanded the world and it had expanded the vision of the novel into the film. That was really exciting because she managed to lift, from a very dense novel in basically one location, an entire cinematic world.
And the film does open it up quite a bit, but we still do have that hayloft setting as kind of the most important location where most of the story takes place. But it never feels static, So how do you work to keep the film feeling dynamic and alive and moving throughout, Chris?
Well, I think part of that is in concert with the script. Sarah had built in numerous sort of visual breaks or structural breaks where you would leave the loft. But then as the edit progressed, we were also sort of reimagining some of the flashback footage and using that sort of instinctually and emotionally within the scenes themselves, the loft scenes themselves. And so we sort of found our own language for the film by using this material that were originally established as flashbacks, but ultimately became sort of more expressionistic, emotional visuals.
The other thing that breaks that up is going outside to the children playing in the field in front of the barn as well, which gives you a kind of relief from the conversation in the barn, but also adds a sense of urgency because basically that conversation is affecting their future. So that also helps with keeping the momentum and the pacing going as well.
And in the editing process, I understand that that was when the change in narrators, was decided upon from August to Ocha. What kind of ripple effects did that have on, in terms of how the entire film was put together? Did that sort of transform things, or was that sort of, did it lift right in and right out?
It entirely transformed things. Because all of a sudden you were seeing the film through a new lens, through a new point of view. In the original script, the first, most of the scenes leading up to the scenes in the loft were about August, or at the very least August coming to know and understand what was actually happening to these women. And so once we changed the narrator, we needed a new beginning. So we constructed entirely through material from other scenes, and in some cases using the infrastructure of, or the the scaffolding of August's voiceover in that new opening. And then as we sort of applied the new voiceover, in a sense, the new prism for how the loft scenes were being presented and how the film was being presented, we had to go back in and find ways to bring out Oucha. For the most part, she had been shot in 2 shots with NYCHA. And so we went through and we found every single instance of a close-up. We found every single instance of where we could sort of highlight her character. and then using that new voice, and Sarah essentially went and wrote a page and a half, for at least, sorry, a very long sort of stream of consciousness document finding that voice, at which point we would look at it and go, this idea, this sentence, I think is really important. And I think if we take the footage of the empty kitchens that you shot for the end of the film to be the women have left, and we use that to sort of symbolically heighten or to use it as the idea of the silence that the women were, the way that the way didn't talk about their bodies. It essentially, we were taking material from everywhere to illustrate and ground this new voice.
Also, we were really lucky with those two young actors, Kate Hallett and Liv McNeil. They were just such a surprise because they just instinctively, even though they had a minimal amount of experience compared to the stellar cast, they instinctively knew what to do with their eyes. They knew how to use their eyes. They knew how to stay present in very long dialogue scenes. And I think it's because Sarah, was a child actor, and she really made them feel very comfortable and got really great performances out of them. So when the voiceover was reassigned, it was no problem at all because the acting was there.
And how much footage did you have to work with between different takes and coverage? Was there a lot to select from?
Well, basically, you're tracking 10 stellar performances in a 2-hour conversation in a single location. So it warrants a substantial amount of coverage, and Luke and Sarah covered it extensively. Sometimes I remember one day I had about 11 hours of footage, because it was a big scene that they were running. It was a 10-minute scene that they were running, and they didn't want to interrupt it for the flow of performance. And it was shot with maybe 2 or 3 cameras. So it was a lot of footage, with various angles and various performances, and all of which were pretty amazing. So yeah, that was one of my biggest challenges, was going through and crafting the performance with Sarah.
And with so many great performances in the film, and so much footage, is it difficult to choose the takes and the shots? And I imagine you're going to end up inevitably leaving a lot on the cutting room floor. Was that sort of what it was like?
Yes. There was a lot. There was a lot left behind, and I mean, you just use the first path initially with the conversations. You could follow the rhythm of the actors, because they really settled into their roles very quickly. It was shot chronologically, so you could actually see how quickly they took on their characters. And initially, their sense of timing was so great that you could just kind of follow the cutting pattern, just follow the conversation. And then afterwards, you go in and decide whether you want to focus on the person talking or the person listening, or tension between 2 characters in a shot, or focus on the group as a whole, depending where you are, at what stage you are, and what kind of emotion that you're going for at that stage in the film.
And one of the advantages of having those really long takes is that as you start to distill and sort of restructure and manipulate and all that sort of stuff, you would have these a really long take on Marike, Jessie Buckley, and in the background at certain points there would be Naicha and Oucha, and so say, oh no, we can't, we're using this section of the scene, but we need Oucha to be up in the loft. So then we go to the assistant editor Craig Scorgi and say, can you take Oucha out of this shot, and just that sort of thing. But also it enabled you to do things like, there was a moment, one of Sarah's favorite moment was those 2 teen girls mimicking, sort of, they're so bored and sort of, oh, these adults, and they're sort of mimicking killing themselves. And we were able to take that from like 10 minutes earlier in the scene and go, let's put it here, because it's a great reaction in the background to what Ona's just said. So while there were obviously challenges to having really long takes of these incredible performances. It also gave you great flexibility when you started needing to manipulate where you were going a little bit more.
Also, Sarah and Luke designed it such that each main character had a monologue that was designed to play without interruption. And those were quite lengthy as well. So you would have maybe 10 or 8 takes of the dialogue being played out in full. So it was a matter of, we got the assistants to line them up back to back, and so that Sarah could see them immediately, and we would choose one. So that's 1 out of 1 take used, 9 on the floor, right?
As you mentioned, Roslyn, we don't see the assaults take place, and that was something that was important to Sarah Polley, I understand, but we do get to see the aftermath glimpses of it. How do you approach that, those, post-traumatic moments, and, how much to show, how long to linger on it? Like, what were those decisions?
I guess they're very short, and Chris can speak to this as well. And the idea is, again, to focus on the aftermath and at the moment where the women are realizing what happened to them, and just to bring the audience in and give a little bit more information and to add to the cinematography of the film. They were kept short so that the audience can imagine for themselves what happened prior to this moment. And I think they're placed right at the kind of it when the women are recalling during the conversation. It's coming back, and it's coming back into their consciousness what happened to them, and informing them as they decide what to do about the violence done to them.
Yeah, certainly. And they were scripted as scenes. And then over the course of the edit, they just got shorter and shorter and shorter so that they were more expressive. And because if you would cut away to the full scenes, you would generally sort of lose the momentum of the conversation. So rather than feed the conversation, they were sort of detracting from them a little bit. But you could use, say, for an example, the very opening scene of the film, Ona waking up in bed. That was how it was scripted, but it was scripted to come much later in the film. It was scripted to come when Ona's actually speaking with Marieke. In the end, we just use very quick shots in the conversation itself, but use what was built originally as the opening scene of the film.
It definitely played that the shorter those flashbacks were, the more impact that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And how long overall was the process of editing the film before the movie was locked and ready to go? Was it longer than usual or quicker than usual? How did that go, Roslyn?
I think in all, from July to March through, and
Yeah.
and I think given the complex conversation and the amount of footage, that was kind of like a mid-range to normal time spent.
Yeah, and certainly when, deep in the edit, when you decide actually we're going to completely reinvent the movie and come up with a new narrator and so on and so forth, naturally that's going to extend the schedule a little bit. But, it felt like once we did that, that's when the movie became itself. That's when it really started to gallop, the edit and the film.
And how does it feel after spending so much time with the film and all this footage when it's finally ready to go and to send it out into the world? And what does that feel like on this film and really any film, Chris?
It's strange because you become so intensely connected to it and the process of it and the characters and the people and the process of making it. And for Sarah, the process is just as important as the final product. So it's a very unique and really incredible creative experience. So then when it's done, you're in a pretty vulnerable state. You feel, so much for it, but you really don't know how it's going to be accepted because it's become so personal to you. And you've had some friends and, family screenings, that sort of thing, but you really don't know. And so for it to be as it seems to really be affecting people, which is an extension of the months that we were on it. And so therefore, it's gratifying, incredibly gratifying, a huge relief. And you just want people to be able to share the experience you had and to share the sort of lessons of the film, the meanings of the film, and the fact that it is getting out there and people are responding the way I've responded is really, really incredible.
Yeah, I think gratifying is a great word, to see the audience be so moved by it and embrace it wholeheartedly. And, if the film has such an optimistic, hopeful stance on domestic violence or violence against women, and if it pushes that conversation forward, and if audiences are embracing it and moved by it and talking about it afterwards, then it's extreme. I would see that as an extreme success.
Mhm.
Well, I want to congratulate you both on your work on the film, and the recognition and praise it's been receiving. And thank you so much for talking with me about it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Really, really appreciate being invited to speak with you.